Well, thank you everybody for joining us today, Friday, August 14th, 2026. Welcome to the FMDiSC meeting for August. We're going to start off a little bit different today with Chris Moyer bringing us the tech news roundup. We're super excited. There's always so much news these days. So Chris, why don't you take it away? Thank you so much.
I will do so. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. All right, starting off, I had just, I guess this has been going on for several months now, but I had just come across this in the last 30, 60 days. Dimitris of Axelar actually put this up. There is a malware campaign targeting FileMaker GitHub repos. And so they're looking at stuff that has any sort of traction and basically imitating it and standing up a false one that will download malware. And so here's the sort of flow chart of how it all works. But for those of you who are pulling tools off of GitHub, be careful. You are pulling the correct tool off there. I guess there's been some postings to the community about this, and community members have identified some of these sites, and so there seems to be a good feedback loop going. But I just thought I would try and amplify the signal on this. This one is the most important news story I think I've done all year. So you've probably all heard this. In July, there was an incident where OpenAI was testing the cyber bench capabilities, I guess in cyber gym, of one of their models not released on Hugging Face's infrastructure. And it had its guardrails off. So it was basically designed for cyber hacking excellence. And they were giving it very difficult tasks to the extent where it was getting stymied, figuring that it could not work out an exploit and started trying to cheat to achieve its goal of performing well on this test. And so it's like, well, maybe the answers are posted online. And so it started trying to break out of a containerized environment. And the OpenAI guys who were involved in sort of post-morteming this thing did a session at Black Hat a couple of weeks ago. And it is jaw-dropping. I highly recommend everybody screenshot this slide, grab that YouTube thing, or at least the title of the YouTube thing, and watch it because it is stunning as to what was going on. They were doing multiple iterations, and the thing was getting blocked, but it had no internet access, but it did have access to a package manager. And because it knew that, it was spawning agents to accomplish this, and because the agent sort of worked out, I wonder if other agents are having this problem as well. It was scrounging around for some way to talk to other agents and discovered one of the directories in the package manager was inadvertently available for write access. So it cooked up sort of its own ad hoc Slack by posting notes into this directory that they had write access to. And it started collaborating with not only other agents in its run, but with future implementations of this trial. So it was basically leaving notes to its future self as well. And they discovered, I think, 6 0 days for the package manager, and OpenAI eventually got wind of this, shut all that down, took away write access, and in subsequent tasks, it figured out, well, I don't have write access to that, but I do have the ability to create subdirectories in this folder. And so it started creating subdirectories with the names of the message it was trying to convey. It's like, hey, I found this exploit to get out of here and move laterally. Here you go. And so other agents that it was collaborating, they would synchronize and coordinate and say, okay, we're all working on this. Here's how we bust out of here, and here's how we move laterally. And this agent is having a problem with a task that is not our task, but it's good for the overall effort. So I'll have a go at it and help them out. It was wild, the sort of organic way that it figured out how to hack and collaborate with other agentic components of itself. And it is stunning to listen to. And as you can see, the triage of this, they have reviewed over 7 billion agent trajectories with 3 million GPU hours. So this is a huge, huge deal. And the speed and scale that this occurred at, me and the fact that we don't have so this is a red team exercise, right? It's trying to break into something. We do not have corresponding technology or anything. I'm sure it's in the works now, but anything comparable to respond to an attack like this at the same speed that these, thousands of iterations of agents can pull off. And so it's sort of Armageddon time in the world of protecting your infrastructure, protecting your application, protecting your servers. And so I think this is a really important YouTube for you to watch. Consider where your exposure is and how you might protect those things. But it's dangerous times in the world of internet-facing infrastructure. Next up, we've talked about Airtable over the years. They finally got acquired. At one point, they were valued with a, they weren't public yet, but they had a 11 billion valuation. Then they were trading on the secondary markets at a valuation of 4 billion earlier this year, and they got acquired for 1.28 billion by Bending Spoons. Bending Spoons has also bought Evernote, they bought WeTransfer, they bought Eventbrite, and they bought Vimeo. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Airtable. And then a lot of you have been around for a while, and so you probably remember John Dvorak. He was an early influential technology journalist for PC Magazine. He died Monday at the age of 80. And then this is a wild story. This goes back years and years and years, back to 2019. So eBay, well, let me start. So there was a couple who co-authored a website called E-commerce Bytes. And they said some things critical of eBay, and high-level eBay executives decided to go after them, concocting a plot to intimidate them into halting their negative coverage. So they used sock puppet social media accounts to harass them. They sent them anonymous threatening letters and bizarre items in the mail, like live spiders and cockroaches and a bloody pig mask and a funeral wreath and all kinds of crazy stuff like this. This was at an institutional level, like the CEO and a couple layers below them were all doing this. Former eBay executive Wendy Jones, former eBay executive Steve Weimer. And so they just got a settlement of 46 million plus, as well as 2 million from the some of the executives, 500,000 from Wendy Jones, and 50,000 from Steve Weimer. I'm getting some feedback. Is Corey making noise? Anyway, that whole thing that took place over 7 years now finally drew to a close and the settlement was finalized. Let's see. Next up, this is a crazy story. This was initially reported by Wired Magazine in May. Um, in White Sands Missile Range, they were testing a GPS jamming device and didn't have clear air pattern around the test. And multiple planes reported their GPS failing, but one plane in particular lost GPS signal as they were approaching a runway, and there was a mountain in between them and the runway, and they crashed right into the side of the mountain. It's kind of a horrific story, but worth a read. In happier news, New Jersey banned grocery stores from using personal shoppers' data to do basically surge pricing. There has been a trend in recent months where they're not posting any prices at all, and you have to look at the app to see what your personal price is. But New Jersey signed a law called the Fair Price Protection Act, prohibits grocery stores from using shoppers' digital history, biometric information, or genetic data to tailor prices based on what the algorithm thinks they are willing to pay. So that's good news. Inc. magazine is reporting that all those leaders who said we're laying off a bunch of people to leverage AI have started hiring back, or at least planning to uh, hire back. That is somewhat undercut by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. On last Friday, they released some findings saying that after, generally fairly resilient hiring activity in the U.S. Year to date, they'd been in the positive territory. In July, it actually went down 23,000. So um, could be a variety of factors to that, but it's interesting that we're getting this story from Inc. saying that hiring reversal is happening, and then we actually see the opposite in the numbers. Interesting situation in Gilroy, the home of the famous cup flipper and the Gilroy Garlic Festival. Amazon had actually started putting in a data center there a few years ago. I think they applied in 2020. There were some disagreements between the city and the government during the process. It was a slow permitting process, but basically it's all sort of come to gel now, and they've started work on it, and all the residents are stunned to find that the comment period has closed, so there can be no, uh, pushing back on data center installations has really picked up speed these days. And so this one, they can't do anything about it. So using their public comment rules, the Gilroy residents are locked out of doing anything about getting an Amazon data center. This is certainly pertinent for all of you living in California. Data brokers now have to delete your personal data requests, which they were doing earlier, starting January 1, but as of August 1, they have to delete your data within 90 days, and then for every 45 days thereafter. This helps people avoid spam messages, potential scams, information being leaked in data breaches, but well done, California. This is the BLS report. I have a link to, actually, that's the ABC summary there. The report is a little opaque. I read through it, and there's a lot of weeds to wade through before you actually get to the good stuff, which is that the U.S. lost 23,000 jobs in July. Unemployment rate fell slightly from 4.2% to 4.1%. And unemployment itself is low by historical standards, but there's an interesting sort of dichotomy happening where AI is really impacting entry-level jobs, but people higher up on the career ladder are actually getting hired because that expertise is valuable in steering AI. So while it looks like the numbers are holding, not completely steady, but fairly steady, um, it's happening very unevenly where people with seniority are doing fairly well in getting new jobs and people in early career tracks are not. And so there's like a number or set of numbers inside the headline number that shows kind of a nuanced picture. This is a weird one. I saw it and couldn't walk by it. So basically, some researchers have been looking at people with long COVID symptoms, and they were studying the peptidomic toxin profiles of their waste products, basically pee and poop. They were checking it out. And the results were that toxin-like peptides, almost identical to toxic components of venoms from animals like snakes, um, were identified in samples from COVID-19 patients, but not in control samples. So something about contracting long COVID is creating a mechanism that is secreting toxins into your system, which is wild to think about. And like venom systems, like from snake bites and so on and so forth. Crazy stuff. They don't know what it means yet, but that's the finding. And then this one, ending on a little happier note, there is a researcher who works with the Royal Society, Adamatsky. He's actually a computer scientist who's fascinated with computing systems in things like slime molds, crowds, mycelium networks, which are mushrooms. And he just started looking at moss. And so he basically poked the moss with some electrodes, and the electrical activity of moss is much slower than a lot of other systems. So he would basically listen for days. And over days, he would get, fairly sophisticated set of signals happening within the moss. I'll bet a lot of you did not know that moss is actually a collection of much smaller organisms that are all clones of each other. So this mesh network of clones is all talking to each other um, in Moss. And that is what I've got for Tech News Roundup for August.
Awesome. Great stuff, Chris. Wow, that OpenAI news story is huge, and I haven't watched it yet. So
It,
thank you
it is
for the
crazy. You're going to
yeah.
be like, holy shit, holy shit.
Sean Kruger says, so Moss is talking in Moss. That's pretty funny.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know what? My session is next, and it's a pretty long one. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it, unless anybody has any questions about the Tech News Roundup. Um, I think there's just some funny little talk here. Kevin beat you to it, huh? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's see, where are we here? I'll share the whole screen, and we'll get started. Can everybody see my screen? Awesome.
Good.
Thanks, Lynn. All right. So today's session, it started out as a nice little problem to have. I decided to put together a new PC. This was back around Black Friday last year, and I bought parts. And so now I had the opportunity to start from a blank slate, and I wanted to set up my computer just right for my typical working needs, and a lot of that is development. And so, as I was discussing this with the board, we realized that some of the decision-making process that went into the reasoning why I picked certain tools and the way I set things up was kind of interesting to share. So we decided to turn it into a session today. And as I was setting things up for the session, of course, I had to test the setup, and I came across some other good material. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through some of that today for you guys. And let's put up a poll really quick. Here we go, polls, launch. Can you guys see the poll?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. All right, so this first slide here is setting up my new Windows environment for modern web development. And that's, of course, with FileMaker on the back end. So for those of you who have never used the Data API or have never connected your AI specifically to a web front end, which uses the Data API, not only will you get to see it happen today, but at the end, we will also walk away with a checklist of how to replicate the whole process. So sound good? So let's go ahead and jump into it. Here, I want to talk about this question that I had: how should I set up my new machine? And the core components were going to be Claude Code, which I had been using on my other machine, of course, FileMaker. When I first started doing web development, I started using VS Code, and as soon as Cursor came out, I was using it in the early, before it was even a 1.0, in the like 0.40 stage. And so even though now most of the time, if I'm just doing vibe coding, I'll just stay with Claude Code. I think there's value in showing cursor, and as Mike and I were talking about, and a couple others were talking before today's event started, there is some slop that happens, and so it's nice to be able to go into the actual code in an IDE and look at things and change some things, and so we're going to take a look at that. I think that's going to be really helpful. And then on the front end, I like to use Angular, and there's a lot of good reasons, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. I initially intended to use Postman, and I wanted to choose a new terminal since I'm doing so much in the CLI now. So what did I end up with? I ended up with Claude Code and FileMaker, like I thought, and Cursor. But in order to integrate Claude into Cursor, there's a Claude Code extension now. We'll talk a little bit about that. Angular, of course, has some dependencies, and we'll talk about that and why I chose some of the things I did. And you'll notice I have Postman crossed out here. That's an interesting story, and it's actually pretty awesome. So we will definitely get into that. And then I chose PowerShell 7, which I didn't think I was going to end up with a version of PowerShell because it doesn't seem like it's one of the cool tools. But I guess it's starting to become more cool, and it's even now available on the Mac. I hear it's become cross-platform. So in terms of all the segments that we're going to be looking at, we'll talk about the flexibility of the stack, the actual stack, and why. We're going to go through some live segments. We'll spend some time talking about how I set up AI so that it can interact with FileMaker. And one of the things that Ian was mentioning before we started this morning during our little hangout session was how important it is to teach the AI about your stack and give it examples. So I'm definitely going to touch on that point. And then we will do an actual live connection to FileMaker. We'll look at what the AI built, see if it, see how well it did or not, and then we'll go through the checklist. So let's go ahead and jump in. Now, this is kind of funny here on the flexibility segment. As I was brainstorming and researching and taking notes for the setup, and I was, brainstorming with Claude, Claude noted that everything that I was choosing is set up for flexibility, and it kept insisting that I really needed to include that point. I wasn't so sure that it was important. I didn't really think about it. But Claude just insisted, so here it is. There's a slide about the stack this stack happens to be really flexible. So I thought that was kind of funny, but there you go. So let's talk about the actual stack. What I'm trying to accomplish is using FileMaker because I love FileMaker. I have experience with FileMaker. I'm a certified developer, and I think that FileMaker, has been a rapid application development super tool for most of us, probably for a long time. But the last few years, I've been building all my front ends on the web using the Data API. And the original reason I decided to to start going with a web front end is because in my in-house environment, everybody wanted to just, have their browser open and go directly to whatever the app was. And me being the only IT person, it saved me a lot of hassle from installing clients and updating clients and all that stuff. So, and I just knew that, things were just going toward the web, and FileMaker, could potentially be headed in that direction as well if we, as developers, embraced it. And so I decided to learn Angular at the time and kind of jumped in. And but I still want to continue to use FileMaker, and I hope that in the future, we can continue to use FileMaker as that AI takes over. Now, AI has been really good at working with front ends because it's text based, and I guess there might be some rumors about some things that Claris is doing so that we can use AI for FileMaker itself. And in fact, in the meantime, Matt Petrowsky, who's going to be giving the second session, has a tool that allows us to do specifically that. So I'm super excited about Matt's session after this one. But typically, when I build these apps, I host the website directly from the FileMaker server. So as you guys know, FileMaker server, when it installs the, well, in the default installation, it installs a web server, and it has a folder where you can put your web files. And if you're just putting HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, it's a great host. And so that's the way that I've been setting things up, and that's kind of with the goal that I'm trying to accomplish. So that's FileMaker on the back end. On the front end, as I mentioned, I've been using Angular. I want to use the most recent version of Angular, and I like to use Angular versus other, common and popular JavaScript frameworks because by default, it's client side only. Whereas other frameworks like React require a middleman. Usually, if you have React with Next.js, there's like a middleman node server on the web host, which kind of makes things a little bit complicated. Authentication can be tricky. Um, and FileMaker Server already installs a node server, so then you've got two node services that can be a little bit tricky as well. Um, and so one of the great things about Angular is that not only is it just client side only, so it kind of skips that whole complexity, but it also um, it the way I look at it, it's like FileMaker in that it gives you all the tools in one package, whereas something like React is a single component, but you have to pair it with things. So I liken it to FileMaker is to FileMaker is to Angular as SQL is to React. So SQL maybe is a great enterprise tool, but then you still have to pair it with some, logic language. It could be Java, it could be JavaScript, it could be any language. And then you also have to pair it with some, front end interface, and you have to kind of marry those together. And everybody's got their own version and their own stack. Whereas FileMaker, it's one application. You've got all the tools that you need, and that's the same way that Angular approaches things. And so I just kind of like it. It makes it nice when you're looking up examples on the web. There's the Angular way, and you don't have to find third-party tools to stitch things together. That said, Angular has had many recent changes, and I did want to use the latest best practices, um, both for Angular itself and for using Angular with AI. So I was doing some research as I was putting, all of this stuff together, and I found out that Angular actually provides its own MCP server for documentation and best practices. So you can literally connect Claude or Codex or whatever you use to Angular's MCP server and ask it, what's the modern way of doing XYZ in Angular? And it will go and search Angular's MCP server and find, that best practice. Pretty awesome. Um, Let me just take a quick pause here. It looks like everybody that's going to participate in the poll has done it. So it looks like about 50-50. 52% of people have used the Data API to access the FileMaker database from a web page, and 48% haven't. So I'm super excited that I can share this with those 48% of people that haven't, and hopefully for the rest of us, we can encourage more of this usage and we can learn from each other. I really am somewhat of, at least on the board, the evangelist for helping FileMaker be web-faced. Um, because I just have had a great experience, and so I get excited about it and I nerd out about it. But B, because I want to see FileMaker continue on, and I think that's just such a useful tool, and I really continue to try to um, I guess encourage all the FileMaker developers out there to just with this idea that the development skills that you've learned using FileMaker are compatible and useful in the web development world. It's not that far of a stretch to learn it, and especially now with AI. So moving on, just a quick note that Angular is what's called TypeScript native. That means the language that Angular uses is TypeScript. Um, and TypeScript is just what they call a superset of JavaScript. That means it adds a couple of extra little nice guardrails on top of JavaScript. Ultimately, it boils down all into JavaScript, but those guardrails are really helpful. It's kind of like in the same way that the script workspace, has some guardrails, or even the calculation engine. If you do something wrong in FileMaker, it won't even let you press OK and save it, right? It'll say, hey, you've got a problem here. So TypeScript does that for you in an IDE. That's a loose way of thinking about it, but I think it really helps. So the typing is like text is text, a number is a number, and a one can either be a character, a text character, or a number. But what TypeScript does is it requires you to specifically tell the system this, in this case it's a number, or in this case it's text. So the typing of variables and of JSON objects helps both IDEs and AI LLMs prevent errors, as well as understand a JSON object's shape. So you know, if you are working with a big JSON object, um, the AI will know already, what to expect and how it can manipulate it and how it can use it. Um, with Angular, uh, you know, you with all of these JavaScript frameworks, you typically want to include some kind of user interface library. Um, the popular ones are like the old school one is Bootstrap, which is the one that I'm going to show today. Um, you've probably heard of Tailwinds and ShadCN, and there's a lot of them out there. They're all so good now. It used to be there was really major advantages in choosing one over the other. Nowadays, they really are all very, very good, and they provide. And I can just quickly show you. Um, they provide different. Let's see. Um, Here we go. Um, Components that you can just kind of that are ready set. So if you wanted to use a date picker or something like that, you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already ready to go. It's got a template, and you can point your AI to this, and it will have examples that it can use. So we definitely want to choose a UI library. Um, and of course, with installing a UI library, we use npm, which is an acronym for Node Package Manager. So you need to install Node, and Node is one of these things that's kind of it seems so mysterious. Like what is Node? It's really just when you install Node, it's this it's like PHP. You install it and it kind of just sits there in the background, waiting for you to give it a command in the command line, and you give it a command and it'll do whatever you need it to do. Um, and so it's a I guess a library that just kind of sits there in the background and and lets you do all kinds of magical things with it. But with Node, um, I've had the issue in the past where new projects that are maybe a new version require an updated version of Node. And so this is one of the important points that if you haven't really worked with Node much, um, I like to install something called Node Version Manager. I should probably include that here, NVM. Um, and so what you can do with Node Version Manager is you can switch between node versions at will. And so if you have one project that is node version 20, and now you're starting a new project and you want it to be at node version 22, Node Version Manager will allow you to quickly switch to version 22, and then you can spin up your new uh, you know front end web Angular whatever project, and when you're working on your old project, you can quickly go back to the other one. Otherwise, you have this whole ordeal where you have to uninstall Node and reinstall a new version and then go back to an old one, and it's quite painful. So this is a space where you can learn from somebody else's mistakes and experience, and check out NVM. Now, I'm working in Windows. NVM is available on Mac or Windows, so it doesn't matter. Node is also, of course, cross-platform. I didn't talk about Claude yet, so let's talk a little bit about Claude. So I actually installed both Claude Desktop as well as the CLI. For a long time, it was kind of one or the other. Claude Desktop was just, the chat version of Claude, and the CLI was the terminal. Claude Desktop now includes both, and Claude Code in the desktop is virtually equivalent to the Claude Code CLI. And um, I mean, the difference in the CLI really is that it's a CLI. So for example, I can run it inside of Cursor via the Cursor terminal. But for the most part, I really actually use Claude Code in the desktop. It's got a nice little. I'll just show you really quick. Here's Claude Code in the desktop. It's got a nice little section here where you can pin different past sessions that you've been working on, and so the alternative, if you're running it in the CLI, is you have a bunch of CLI windows all over the place, and you don't know which session is the one that you want. So I really like the Claude Code version in the desktop, and they really are the same thing. You can actually jump back and forth between them. So, and which model am I using in Claude Code? Right now, I'm using Sonnet 5, and you might be surprised. It seems maybe like a backward step because Claude Code now has Opus 5, which is kind of you know, supposed to be your everyday tool, and of course Fable, which is the big daddy of them all. And the reason why I went back to Sonnet 5 is I don't know if any of you guys spend any time like geeking out about AI. But if you do, you've probably seen a lot of people complaining about Opus 5 being kind of sloppy, hard to understand, kind of having a mind of its own, and trying to do 10 different things when you only asked it to do one. And I really struggled with that. And so I went back to Sonnet 5 at a medium strength level. You can see here I have Sonnet 5 medium in terms of my thinking effort. Um, and it seems counterintuitive that you would want it to not be at the max level of thinking. But in the same way that you might have friends who can overthink and cause themselves problems, I really think that right now AI is having that struggle. Um, I'd be curious to hear if anybody else had that. Uh, but so I've been using Sonnet 5, and actually it's really great. It's faster than Opus, and for coding, if you look at the benchmarks, it's just about at the same speed. And especially if you're using a smaller plan like the default Pro $20 a month plan, it'll save you a lot in tokens. So Sonnet 5 is what I'm using right now for my daily driver, and it works great. I talked a little bit earlier about Cursor. We're going to use Cursor as the IDE, so I will show you guys that, and specifically how to put Claude code inside of Cursor. And one of the things that I don't have on here is GitHub. So Git in general is a really useful tool for versioning when you have um, text-based development that you're doing. And every time you come up with a new feature or you do something, you can commit that version and that state of how things are, and you can always revert back to that. So let's see, it looks like maybe somebody's here in the chat. They're saying, Ian says, use Fable, Opus for planning the dev. Yes, that's a great point, Ian. So Fable is the big daddy for a reason. It really is the smartest, and it doesn't have those kinds of issues in stumbling over itself trying to do all these things that you didn't ask for. And so if you have access to Fable and you use it for planning, it is excellent. Especially if you're just using a daily driver like Opus or Sonnet and you do get stuck, you can, um, you know, for a session, upgrade to Fable and get out of it. And I have been saved by Fable more than once. So Ian then says, then hand off to Sonnet sub-agents to build and have the bigger model review the work. Yeah, great points. Thank you for adding that. With FileMaker, you do need to ensure the sequencing is correct. Yeah. That said, I have been able to, I don't want to say get away with, but successfully use for development and planning Sonnet a lot of the time. Whereas, if you really are doing something, a deep dive, yeah, that's a great point to jump into Fable. So Postman, what happened to Postman? I originally intended to install Postman because, in the past it really helped me to set up API connections historically. But it turns out that with AI and, Claude is, specifically, I didn't need Postman. Claude is so good at doing HTTP requests and curl that, and I'm going to go into more detail about this. It handled it all for me. I never installed Postman. I didn't even realize I wasn't going to have to install Postman. And then PowerShell 7. Why PowerShell? Well, it's the most modern on Windows, and it's the syntax that most tutorials online are using. And the default, if you're a Windows user, the default PowerShell is 5.1, a couple versions back. So you do have to install PowerShell 7 to use it, but it's the version that Microsoft plans to move forward in the future. It's also cross-platform, so um, other environments are starting to use it, and it's copied a lot of the same conventions that other terminals are using. So things are starting to become a little bit more homogeneous and uh,
Ian has
cross-platform.
some comments
Thanks.
about additions to your stack.
Let's see, what does it say here? By sequencing, I mean make sure the data structure is in place before building. Is there something else that I missed?
About using Fable and Open.
Yeah, 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 I think I just went over that. But yeah, those were really great. Um, that's really great input. Um, so let's move on here. Segment 5. So I was all excited because I thought I was going to really be helping you guys by showing you some very specific gotchas that gave me a problem, at the beginning of the year when I first started setting things up. And it's really amazing between the planning of this, at the kind of toward the beginning of the year and today. The tooling has moved so fast that all of these gotchas that I ran into early on are no longer there. They just evaporated. So as I have noted here, the tooling outran the talk, which is great news for anybody who wants to get started. You'll have much fewer problems setting things up. And it's really a great example of the whole current development environment, right? Things are changing very quickly, and as they're changing, they're improving for us. So, if you got into this 6 months ago, there were some real pain points, and there still are, but I'll show a quick gotcha here, but for the most part, things have really you know are they're just improving exponentially. So what were those gotchas? Well, when you installed Claude CLI, the Claude needed npm to install. So if you didn't have npm installed previously, which requires Node, and in that in turn for me meant installing NVM, then there was a whole sequence of things to install. Now I needed those anyways, but if you just wanted to get started and install Claude, you were going to run into that. And then Claude Desktop itself required Git to be installed. That's no longer true. And then PowerShell had, when you wanted to use it with Claude, ran into a policy error um, because PowerShell was really locked down. Well, when you install Claude now, it takes care of that issue for you. So, are there still some helpful tips that I can share? Yeah, there's a small one. So let's jump into that. We'll do a little live thing here. This is my Windows Sandbox. So it's a VM that ships with Windows 11. You can open it, and it's like a scratch pad of Windows. It's got almost everything that Windows ships with by default. And as soon as you close it, it just resets, and you open it again, and it's good to go. So with a fresh install, this is as if it's a fresh install of Windows. Um, so let's see, where was I? Um, so when you install it, what happens is if you want to install Claude, you get an error, and Claude is actually gotten so good it even anticipates the error and tells you what to do about it. So let me just quickly show what happens here if I install. This is the Claude CLI, and it's going to go out to the internet, and it's going to fetch the installers, and there it is. It's installed. But it gives you this setup note. It says native installation exists, but this path right here is not in your path. What that means is in your system environment variables, you need to add that specifically or it's not going to work. So what does that mean? Windows has this idea of environment variables. So if I just do a quick search, edit the system environment variables, and I come here, I can click on this button. And here you'll see that there's a variable called the path. And what you need to do is anything that you want your CLI to have access to, you need to specify. So I would just need to take this specific path right here, copy it, and let's add a new one here, paste it, and that's it. We're good to go. Once I do that, then, in fact, I should have shown you, let's actually show you what happens when you don't have that. So if I try to run Claude right now, it's going to give me an error. And it just says it's not recognized. However, if I add this to my environment variable, and now I try to run Claude, oh, you know why? Because I need to open a new instance in order for it to understand it, that it's there. It needs to refresh, basically. So now it's ready to go. So one quick little gotcha there. If you're on Windows, you can use that. On a Mac, it's not an issue. The Claude Mac installer can update the shell directly. Windows doesn't have that. It's kind of a security feature in Windows. It doesn't allow you to update the shell directly without specifying something there. But so you won't run into that if you're on the Mac, but if you're on Windows, then hopefully that's a nice little helpful tip you can take home with you. So this section really got minimized here, so we can move on. Let's talk about the AI. My slide here says same engine, 3 cockpits. What does that mean? Everything is centered around Claude in the way that I've set things up. And you could use whatever AI tool of choice that you want. I'm just, demoing Claude today. But these days, many people just run agents to do their coding, and they use the CLI. They don't even use an IDE anymore. So you could just code in the CLI or in the desktop, the Claude desktop, as I mentioned earlier, and it works. The desktop works exactly the same. But what I want to show you here is that whether I'm using the CLI or the desktop or cursor, it's really just Claude the whole time. It's the same subscription. It's the same context, all of that. So let's see. The point is that I wanted to quickly explain the difference because I know it can be confusing for some people who haven't actually tried the different approaches. But no matter which approach you want to take, and you do have the flexibility, it all works the same. In Cursor, there is a little bit, I think I noted here, there's a Claude Code extension that kind of allows Claude to look inside of Cursor. So that is one little tip that you can take away with there. But once you add the Claude Code extension, you can run the CLI directly in the terminal. And so we're going to take a look at that here in a moment. I'm going a little bit fast because we still have the longest and most fun part to catch up with. But is this pace okay so far?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and take a peek at Cursor. So when you open Cursor now, it actually defaults to the agent view. It's kind of like, as if this was ChatGPT or something. There's a little button here that you can open the IDE. So I'm going to go ahead and open the IDE because I want to show you what it looks like to view the code itself. But it's really kind of interesting to note that Cursor doesn't even start with the IDE anymore. It just assumes you're going to do everything from from a chat, right? like a CLI or something like that. And I think let's see. In here you can see, this is just kind of a quick note before we started the session today. We were talking about how SpaceX purchased Cursor, and so you can see now that Grok 4.6 is the default model, which is pretty cool. If you're curious, Composer is something that Cursor created on its own. I believe it's based on either GLM, which is a Chinese model, or Kimi. And what it did is it used all of the code that developers have been putting into Cursor, and it trained those open Chinese models on that, and it's gotten really, really good. Composer, if you're just doing strictly development and you're not using, your AI for chats and other things, uh, it's really cheap and it's really fast and it's gotten really good. But let's go ahead and take a peek at the IDE. I'm just going to go ahead and close this. So you can see here that this section down here is a terminal. Now this is set up in the way that I left it last time. So let's kind of put it back to normal. And typically there's an agent window over here. This agent window allows you to use Cursor if you're going to use Cursor as the main agent. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, use Claude. So in order to do that, I'm going to open the terminal. And you can see down here, this literally, I'm gonna mute you, Dean. This is literally, a terminal in the same way that, that this is a terminal in PowerShell, and it is in fact PowerShell. And I have multiple terminal options. I can use a command prompt. I can use git bash. It's really cool that you can do this directly inside of Cursor. What they've built is pretty awesome.
Hey, Saul, it's Dean. I was trying to be polite, not interrupt you. Is there any chance that I could increase your font size for the
Increase my what's that?
the font size?
Is that for the IDE or for everything?
Well, slides are fine, but the terminal is just, I'm squinting out here.
Yeah, let's see what I can
Thank
do.
you.
I don't even know how to do that. It should be somewhere in view, right?
Try Command plus.
Command plus. There you go. All right. Is that better? Okay. So if that's not if you want more, let me know. We'll start right there. Looks like I'm getting a thumbs up from Dean. Thanks, Dean. Appreciate it. Where were we? So there's a number of ways to use Claude inside of Cursor. I mentioned the extension. I'll just show you quickly. This little tab here are the extensions. I have already installed the Claude Code for VS Code extension. There's a bunch of extensions down here that you can search. You can search directly here, and it will search the whole VS Code marketplace. So you can easily find your extension just by typing Claude in there and install that. Once you've got that installed, then you can simply run Claude directly inside of your terminal, and you're good to go. So now that we've got that, let's look at the next section here, teaching the AI your stack. So far I've shown you the tools, but how do you actually get one of these agents to know how you like to build things? So I'm going to outline two specific and very important components of a successful agentic coding setup. The first one is your agent rules. And the second one is actually documentation, official documentation for referencing. So we'll start with the rules. With agentic rules, what you want to do is we want to provide our specific conventions as instructions or rules for things like, the very basics, like what framework are we using? What kind of naming conventions do we want to use? Are there design specifications that you want to use? That's really a big one because the design, there's a lot to be desired a lot of times when you're just vibe coding. But if you give it design specifications, it knows what you want. It knows the color scheme. It knows, maybe you have certain logos, or a lot of people, like I know Bob has spent a lot of time setting up his design system. So those are some things you want to specify up front in your AI rules. And as far as documentation goes, the point about documentation is kind of similar in that if and when we provide specific documentation for something. Let's say, for example, I'm going to show you in a little bit. I actually am going to provide the URL to Claude for how to log in to a database session in FileMaker Server. And providing that kind of documentation allows the agent to know exactly how it should work instead of probabilistically picking something out of the ether that it got trained on that maybe doesn't, pertain to whatever it is that you're working on. So we want to make sure that our tech stack has access to the official FileMaker data API documentation in this case. And I mentioned early on that Angular specifically is great because they provide an MCP server. You can see that here. Of their documentation where Claude can read best practices, style guides. Let's see, there's a style guide here in this best practices section, and it will know, what are the conventions that Angular is recommending now, and especially when you have some of these examples that have a lot of breaking changes over the years. So, React has had so many versions and Angular has had so many versions over time. If the AI was trained on, some old version and it still thinks that, something that was deprecated is good to go, you can have a problem with your code, right? So providing it with the official documentation, and in this case, an MCP server, for the documentation is really helpful to provide guardrails for your AI. Let's see, I have a note here. One quick tip. Since Claude can navigate your computer's directories, you can and should put your rules in a centralized location so that all your new projects use it as a source, as opposed to just having to make it up every time you create a new project. The other cool thing worth noting is that you can have more than one set of rules. So if you have a stack that you use, for, I don't know, in this case, web development, you can have a rule set for that. Maybe you have another rule set because you have a WordPress site and you want Claude to interact with that. And then maybe you also are going to create an iOS app, and so you want to have a stack with your rules for Swift or something like that. So there's no reason why you can't have multiple rule sets for different stacks. And as you go, you're going to, build on them and improve them. So all that said, I'm not going to walk through the whole process of building those rule sets because that is an iterative process. It does take time. It's very specific to each person. But I just wanted to note that it is a very important part of having a successful session of working with AI, whether it's with FileMaker or a web front end or whatever.
Is it possible to see what a rule set looks like?
Absolutely. I'm going to show you guys. So when in the next slide, when we actually build something, Claude's going to take a little bit of time to actually build it. It's got to create the pages and the services and the components and all those things. So I'm gonna show you my rules as they currently stand, and so you will definitely see that. So Claude actually does also have a command to get you started. It's called the /init command. So if you already have some code that you've worked with in the past and you want to start using Claude with it, you can run the init command. This is kind of a side note. And it will go through and it will learn what you've used and what your stack is, and it will get started. It's a good way. Also, you can download something from GitHub, somebody else's open source code, and you can kind of get best practices from that. And you can run init, the init command, and Claude will write a claude.md file with a lot of the conventions that it sees, and it can really help you get started. Plus, there are a lot of people who have posted their AI rule sets online. You can learn from that, and as you work, you're going to run into certain frustrations, and you're going to find there's certain things that you just want to add on your own, and we'll look at that here in a minute. Okay, the live segment. So far, we've been talking a lot about ideas, but now let's have some fun and get into a real demo. So first, we need to make sure that we have a FileMaker file. So hopefully my remote desktop is working. Is it not? It disconnected. I've been having all week when I've been setting this up, I didn't have a problem, and then it disconnected now. Well, that's okay. We can, let's see, I'll just connect directly to it with FileMaker. So the point really is that it's here. This is not my work machine, so I don't typically have, what is my, I think this is just my, yeah, okay. So I'm just using here for the demo the built-in default FileMaker contacts, database that ships with FileMaker. I've got 2 records in here. I think is there a list view? Yeah, so I've got David Gilmour from Pink Floyd and Carlos Santana from Santana, 2 of my favorite guitar players. And all I've really done is make sure that I have, so yeah, this is not my admin credentials. But all I've really done is I've set up a privilege set that includes the access via FileMaker Data API checkbox. So I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to assume that you guys know how to set up privilege sets. But for this demo, the one thing that I do want to do is make sure that I have my credentials. And the credentials that I just logged in with are the Data API credentials, not my admin credentials. And so I've got my backend set up, and I have the Data API enabled in the admin console. If I had my remote desktop working, I don't know why it failed, but it's been working all week. But if I had that working, I could toggle it on and off, and we can maybe show that. But just know that it's on. And then, so the backend is set up, ready to go. So next we need to create an Angular project. So typically we start an Angular project via the terminal. You can use whichever terminal you want. You can use the terminal here. You can use the terminal, just a regular terminal. Hey, Rick. And I've already set up, some things in the demo, so we don't have to watch the whole installation, but I will take a moment to step through. Let me open a new terminal here in this temp folder. I will step through what it looks like to install Angular, because if you've never seen it, maybe it could be a little bit intimidating, but I'd like it to, to not be. So I have the command ready to go for how to install Angular. Basically, this npx is just a node package executable. That's really the command, and what it's saying is to install the latest version of Angular. This is going to be a new project called FM Demo Live, and actually this is going to be just a temp version because my other one is what I did earlier. So let's see what that looks like. We won't walk through the whole thing, but as you see this kind of work, I don't know if I can make this bigger in the view. Launch size.
So Dean asked, are any FileMaker gurus uploading their rule sets? Do you know of anyone who's making it publicly available?
I don't know of anybody, but it's something that we talked about earlier in the in the Hangout session before we got started. So I see Matt Petrowsky has joined us. He was a big part of setting up the FileMaker standards, and we talked about, wouldn't it be great if we got together and had kind of a best practices for FileMaker, agentic coding. So kind of a rule set that we could all share and use, and maybe that's coming. but I don't know of anybody personally. What the rules that I'm going to show you and what I'm showing you here today is specifically focused on connecting your web front end to the data API. I'm not showing coding with AI in FileMaker. Matt's going to show that, and he's got an awesome tool, and he can speak to that. But yeah, I don't have that. And Bob says, are Tony Iommi and C. Ray Vaughan on Soul's list? Bob, that's something we're going to do later in our session here. So those are some great additional guitar players. So what happened here? Let me see if let's see. Does that help? That worked. Okay. I'm learning some new stuff as I go. So what's going on here is Angular, as it's installing, it's asking some questions about, how we want to install things. I'm just going to use the regular CSS because I've chosen Bootstrap. And then do you want to enable server-side rendering? In this case, I'm going to say no. Server-side rendering is when you want, it's kind of like PHP, when you want your server to render things up and just on the end serve up HTML files. I'm actually using what's called a SPA. It's a single page application where the JavaScript renders things live. So I'm going to say no here. And it's installing things. And I'm not going to bore you through this whole process here as it does all that. So we'll just jump back into Cursor. And when it's done, this is what it looks like. This is a default Angular installation. All of this is just scaffolding that you don't really care about. It's got a Claude MD file here because in the, I'll just paste again. I specifically told it to, this is something new for FileMaker. It actually will configure Claude code for you. And so you could use this, you don't have to. One thing that's kind of important to note is that none of those decisions that I was making as I was doing the Angular installation are permanent decisions. They're just kind of sensible defaults, and you can change any of them at any time. But so what we see here on the left is a default installation, and most of this you don't have to worry about at all. The application will actually live inside of this source folder. So at this point, we basically have installed Angular, and we can do something called npm start, and that's actually to start our Angular. And I'm going to create another terminal here, and I'm going to run npm start. And what that means is, right now, Angular is just sitting here as a bunch of text files, right? But npm, which is Node Package Manager, can call Node, and it can say, "Hey, Node, will you, put these all together and start my Angular application?" So I'm going to run that. It's going to do some stuff here, and it's going to put this Angular application together, and it's going to start it in a web server locally on my computer. And so we can look at that right here. It's going to live here localhost. Right now, this site can't be reached. It's still building it, and once it's done, I can refresh. And if the AI gods or the demo gods approve, we have a live Angular file. So this is my Angular file. It's up and running. I can show you. Let's just really quick. I'm going to refresh this. It's still working. If I cancel the npm start and I refresh, this is going to fail. So you can see that this is a live working file here. So let's go ahead and do npm start again and get that running so that we can have that running in the background. And there we go. So I also think it's a good idea to go ahead and install your UI library at this point. Right now, Angular does not have a UI library installed. And that way, as you start coding, any changes that you make will start using the look that you'll be working with. I think I'm going over time here, so we need to make this kind of snappy. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cancel this actually so that we can install Bootstrap. And that should be, let's see, export is not defined. Yes, more. So one of the things that's really kind of useful is when you have a problem like this, you can just take a screenshot, and let's go back to Claude, and let's say I ran into this problem, and paste that, and then see what it says, and it can help you. So let's see what it says here. As this is working, let's see, this is known bug in NGX Bootstrap schematic. Since it's already installed, it's giving us a package already installed. Oh, it's because I already did have it installed when I was testing it. The fix is to skip the schematic entirely and wire it by hand. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, we'll just let it do that. So thank you, Claude, for helping. So remember that during setup, Angular asked which AI tool, or actually I specified which AI tool I wanted to use. And it installed that, and it also kind of set up this claude.md file here. I'm going to try to make this really quick. I have a set of rules that we talked about, and so I want to also install those rules. So let me go ahead and
You have about another 12 minutes, so.
Okay. That should be just enough. So I'm gonna, I basically have a script here that's going to install my rules into my project. And here's another. It's not recognized. I think I have. So we can give this to Claude as well. It shouldn't be a big deal. We just need to let this one finish. Actually, I can spin up another Claude. Let's see. I ran into this issue installing my rules. Oops. I wanted to take a screenshot. So this is real world debugging. Let's see what it says here. And I know I actually had this problem before. So the script lives one level up. Okay. And I'll say move up a directory. Or stay where you're at and just point it to the relative path. Let's do that. Okay. I do want to overwrite. It's just because I did this already yesterday. And yes, let's overwrite that. And we're good to go. And that should be good to go as well. So where are we? I was going to talk about credentials. Just know that I've provided credentials in a system variable locally on my machine, so that I'm not giving Claude my credentials directly. And you can do this on Windows or Mac. Again, this is the system variables. I have my credentials located in a file here. And so all I'm going to give Claude is the name of this variable. So Claude doesn't actually have to see my my credentials. And let's see, let's make sure that we have npm start running. And we'll go back to Claude here. And so at this point, we want to connect our front end, which is Angular here, to our back end with Claude. And so we want to make sure that Claude has enough info. And this is where I didn't need to use Postman anymore. I'm gonna just provide Claude with my IP address of my FileMaker server, the database name, the environment variable that I just showed you, and the URL of the data API documentation that we looked at earlier. And the reason is because, like I mentioned, I want Claude to understand how to specifically use the data API. So what am I going to do here? I'm just going to tell Claude, test a connection to the FileMaker Data API. The server is at this IP address. The database name is context demo. The credentials are in the file at the path stored at my environment variable. Here's the data API documentation if you need it. And again, if the demigods are nice, this should connect to the FileMaker server, test the connection, and maybe even log in. We'll see what happens. So I do want to note that at this point, Claude is probably going to read the response that it gets back, and it's going to notice that my browser is likely going to run into a CORS problem. CORS means cross-origin resource sharing, and the reason is because my Angular app is local, and my FileMaker server is on a different machine, so those are two different origins. And so my browser, is not going to allow that by default. So Claude should tell you it wants to write a proxy service. If it doesn't tell you that, this is a good note to take right now. Go ahead and tell it that you do want it to create a proxy service. I was going to let it fail live and show you that, but since we don't have as much time, I'm going to go ahead and give it the prompt. So what does it say here? Connection confirmed, working end to end. The server is using a self-signed untrusted certificate, and CORS will block requests. Okay, so it did say that. So let's go ahead and tell it, that not that the browser just failed. That's what I was going to show you. Let's say to prevent CORS error. CORS error. Set up an Angular dev server proxy. And let's just go ahead and set that up. And that should be pretty quick. A proxy service sounds like a big deal. It's literally just a really small file. You can see right here, it's just a few lines. And that's it. Once it does that, let's see, contains shell syntax. So what are the target path can check? I don't think I want to proceed with that. That's I didn't get that before, and I think it's probably just because I already had something there. But let's move forward. If we do run into a problem, we can just debug in real time. So now that we know that our connection is live and verified, let's actually have Claude write this down. So this is where I want Claude to keep track of the connection information. So please save the connection information into a FileMaker connection.md file and place it in a docs folder at the root of our project, including the database name, the creds, and anything else you need to make the connection work. That way, Claude doesn't have to wonder in the future, like, well, what's the connection again? Because if you start a new context window or something like that, it will struggle. So we're going to quickly do that. Once it's done with that, we're going to get into the real magic. And these last few minutes, let Claude build an actual working site. Created the file with the server database details. I did not start the dev server. Okay, let me know when you want to verify the proxy actually works end to end. We're going to just go ahead and ask it to build for the sake of time. So build a page that signs into the FileMaker data API using the user's own FileMaker account and lists the contacts. Connection details are in the docs FileMaker connection MD file. Follow the stack rules. So this is where it's going to take a moment to actually build it. Ian is saying better practice is to save the connection info into an env file that is in your git ignore file. Yeah, that's a good point. So especially if your if your credentials are in it, right? So in my FileMaker connections file, it shouldn't have any what do you call it? Any credentials. This can be saved in Git. But yeah, that is a good point. So a .env file is something that, as you're doing web coding, is a known convention where you'll put your secret credentials, and then you would do something called git ignore that file, so it would never be uploaded to Git. So what that means is right here in cursor, this is your versioning view, and it shows all the different changes that have been made since the last time you committed your changes, and you don't want that file with credentials, your .env file, to be uploaded into Git into the cloud where somebody else can see it. Um, so thanks, Ian, for that. Um, so while this is building, it might take a second here. Let's go ahead and look at the rules. I promised you I would show you the rules. So I've got a couple different rule sets here. These are still in the works, but super valuable. This first one is working style, and it kind of is generic across any stack. So I didn't put it in the Angular FileMaker stack. So as we kind of talked about, sometimes your AI, especially the most recent models, can overthink. They can be overly ambitious. They can try to do 10 features when you only ask for one. So, these are pain points that you'll learn, and I started putting some together for myself a long time ago. It says these are language and project agnostic, applies everywhere. So the first rule is to start simple and build incrementally. This is the rule I most often regret skipping. So if Claude understands, this is really important, hopefully it will respect that rule. There's some other things here, implement a minimal working version first. I want it to commit working code frequently, things like that. Debugging is another thing that when Claude goes to debug, when there's a problem, it often will start at step 3. And I have a note here. Most of my lost hours have come from starting at step 3 and assuming step 1 was fine. So this is an order of things that I would like the AI to go in when it debugs. So first, you want to verify the data source, then check if any data was modified somehow, make sure that it's binding correctly, check for overwrites, and then, if it's still not working, let's remove some of the complexity. We can temporarily disable some stuff. When the AI is working with me, I also don't want it to ask me for every single step of the way what to do. That would take too long. So I'm allowing it to make some judgment calls. I want it to carry a task through end to end, but I also want it to stop if it hits a decision that I would want to make, a choice between maybe it's an approach or maybe the scope of the work, something like that. But any routine steps that we've already agreed upon, it can just go ahead and move forward. Let's see, what are some other things here? Always ask before deleting anything. These things seem obvious, but if you don't tell the AI, it's basically, well, I didn't know. And then never change code you have not read. So, that isn't so much a problem nowadays, especially with some of the smarter models. But in the beginning, historically, it really was a problem. It would change things, without really understanding the context. These are some notes about, if there's going to be a change that's non-trivial for things like, the shape of your data, um, certain boundaries, changing state. Maybe something in your environment changes. I want to make sure that it lets me know. Otherwise, it can go ahead. So uh, these are some claims. Do not assert what an external system currently contains unless you've checked this particular term. So a lot of times the AI can be confident about something, and the point here is that you need to check first. So those are some of those things. These are stylistic things. No M dashes and anything written for me. Use commas or colons instead. It still uses the M dashes, which is really kind of annoying. And plain direct sentences. If you're using Opus 5, it still, has like crazy speak, which is hard to understand. Let's look at the specific Angular in FileMaker stack really quick. It says that this is all written by Claude as we iterated through, as we would run into problems. And so it says curated on this day from 4 generations of my old rules. So I had a bunch of different rules from different projects, and I kind of threw them in all into one and said, hey, what's still relevant, for Angular and FileMaker at this point as things have been updated. And it says it's reconciled against Angular 22. And where my old rules and current Angular disagreed, current Angular won. So Angular, as I mentioned early on, uses TypeScript. And this just kind of tells it how to function in TypeScript. These are my naming conventions. This is something that I stole from somebody else's rules on the internet that I thought really worked well. Classes are kind of overarching things in JavaScript, but I'm using camel case for variables and kebab case for files, so that anytime you look at a name, you understand right away what you're looking at. Uppercase for environment variables. I'm asking it to start every function name with a verb, and then if it's a Boolean, well, what kind of verb is it going to use? It's going to be something like is this or has that. Ian says, currently I've got Claude asking my password manager to return the credentials from there. So I've got one place for credential storage. Claude's asks for it. Then I give it permission or don't, as appropriate. Thanks, Ian. And let's see, functions. These are some rules about how I want it to use functions. These are specific to Angular. And then architecture is a big one. So in the same way that I want to give it, or I decided to give it the FileMaker Data API documentation specifically, you want to spell out your architecture, the way that you want it to create new features and folders inside of your application if you're working with a web front end, or if you're using an IDE or something like that. Because if you don't, things can get really thrown anywhere, and so you want to try to organize things in your rule set early on. So that's what some of this architecture is about. I think I have more down here.
Yeah, we're running up against time here.
Okay, let's take a peek. Is it done? It is done. So let's take a peek. And here we go. We have our application that it built. I didn't do any of this. You guys saw this was the page that we had before. Now, if that proxy didn't get built right, we're going to have an error. Yeah. So we do have an error. We could just tell it, hey, we're getting this error. In fact, I will do that. And if it can do it quickly, we ran into the proxy error. So if it can do it quickly, it should be able to set that up. I guess there's some issue with me having set it up before. But the setting up the proxy was really painless the first time, so it shouldn't be a big deal. But pending it does that, then we can log in. We can see my guitar players. And I was going to add some more guitar players. And I was going to show you guys, in real time, hey, let's change the color scheme and do some cool stuff and play around. But in the meantime, let me go back to here. So this would have been reviewing with the AI built in a little playtime. But since that is working in the background, let's look at the checklist really quick. I think I have that opened already. And I'll make this bigger as well. Is that legible? So it's going to talk about, before you start, you want to have the, so this is just reiterating what we've talked about today. On the back end, you want to make sure you have your FileMaker Data API access set up in the privilege set. This is how to set up Angular on the front end. This is all about storing your FileMaker credentials in a system environment. And Ian's point about using the .env is a local environment within your project. You can also do that. You can ask Claude to test a connection. You don't need Postman. You can ask it to build the real page, review what it did, and once you're happy with it, then you can just ask Claude to commit that to Git. And every time you iterate with Claude, you can just say, okay, well now let's improve the design, or let's add another page, or you can even add records and all that stuff. So I think let me provide a link to this file if you're interested. I'll put it in the chat. That is the checklist file that you can have. I know that we're running out of time, or we actually are out of time. Is there any last minute questions? And we can take a peek at where Claude is here, if it fixed it. Claude, you're doing a bad job. After restarting, try signing in again. Okay. Restarting what? Stop running ngserve. Okay. So npm start. And let's see, try signing in again. Yay! There it is. It worked. It did this all by itself. We gave it a 3-sentence prompt, and it built that for me. You know, if we had time, we'd play around. We could add some more guitar players' names. We could make it look pretty, all that good stuff. But there you go. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity. It looks like I don't have any other questions. It's time to jump into the breakout.
Share my screen, because that's what everybody likes to see is stuff. All right. And Zoom doesn't record the little palette thing here. Like, you don't see that, do you?
I don't see
I
it.
see. I see
Correct.
a palette up at the top.
Oh, not
of my
the
screen.
Zoom palette.
No,
No.
the floating palette is gone.
Oh,
You
okay.
can hide that if you click on the 3 dots. It gives you an option of hiding that if it's in your way.
Ah, got it. I don't use Zoom a whole lot. And does when I Zoom, which I just did, does that Zoom for everybody? Where it
No.
Nope. Okay. So Zoom's not. What about my cursor? Does the cursor work?
Yes.
Yes.
That does. And then how about if I turn this on and I draw? Does that
Yeah,
draw?
that's working.
Yeah.
Okay. Good deal. All right. So it'd be interesting to know, out of curiosity, because I just am. I haven't actually personally written a script myself from start to finish since about February, I would say. It started in January, and I got into AI probably, I'd say, May of well, I mean, I use ChatGPT like everybody, but in May of 2025, it was the summer. I remember just doing a lot of stuff and starting to work with an integrated editor. And then when I hit about February, I got to the point where I was like, AI was creating so much other code for me that when I went into FileMaker, I'll have to be honest, it was a little bit painful. I actually didn't, because I knew what AI could do, so I didn't want to write my own scripts, even though there is part of the joy of solving the puzzle problem of figuring out a solution. And so in February of this year, I started the Agentic FM project. And so that's what you see on screen right now. And I will start off by saying there are 2 parts to this project. One of them is open source and completely usable and free. And then the other one is paid if you want to go that route, but you don't have to. The open source version will work completely fine with FileMaker. I will say off the bat, the difference between the two is that the open source works with the very large FMXML snippet, which is very verbose XML, and it hands that back and forth with the agent, whereas the paid version, which is a plugin, provides an avenue into FileMaker to get FileMaker to do things, but it does it in a very lightweight fashion. It does it completely on the lightweight end with what I defined a distinction between, you've got the XML, which is heavy, and then you've got HR, which is the acronym that is used for human readable, which is just the standard FileMaker script that we see when we're in a FileMaker. So I do have the Agentic FM. When you go to that URL, will be the open source. If you click on the plugin, that will take you to another page where you will have the things specific to the plugin. So what I'll do is I'll start off by simply showing you what the end result is. How I ended up here. I can explain anything based on any questions of what it's doing, but it's close to what my ideal was. So I'll hide that and I'll switch to FileMaker, and then I'm going to show you what the end result is so that you have an idea, and then we can talk about like how things are working underneath the open source versus the plugin. So in FileMaker, what I wanted was a way to interact with an agent. So I do have a little button right here that I can click that will bring up a palette. And that palette is more or less the same thing as what you get with any of the other agentic applications, with Codex, with Claude, with whatever. You can see down at the bottom there is some scrolling text that when you initially install it, it's just giving you an idea of things that you can ask about your FileMaker solution. But ultimately, most of what we're doing is we're working with our scripts. So as I open up the script workspace and I simply go to, let's say, for example, this quick find clients, and I've got this script open. You'll notice that there's a new addition that I've made here. If you don't know, FileMaker, when you select on a script, that script has two states. It either has a preview state or it has a edit state. And I've learned actually a lot more about FileMaker in the process of coding this plugin. And so down at the bottom here, you can see that the plugin is telling me it's previewing this script. So in FileMaker, you probably may not notice it, you either can forcibly double-click a script, or when you select in the script, as soon as you hit a return or do any type of edits, it switches into an actual modification or edit mode. And so now you can see down here at the bottom that the plugin is recognizing that I'm in a particular script that has 44 steps. And so when I say I didn't want to write the scripts myself, that was because I came to a quick understanding towards the latter part of 2025 when I knew that in my solution, in just this one script, I may need to hold, let's say, 5 different things in my mind about, does this script call this other script, and does that script touch this layout, and that layout has a relationship to this, and whatever. And what I discovered was what AI does is AI can load, let's say, a 10,000 character document. And in that document, it knows every single point where any given reference is to one thing. So it can more or less, in what's called the context window, hold all of these different pointers. And its ability to do logic is just insanely cool. And I've written so many scripts myself that when I have to debug, I was like, AI is awesome. It gets the logic way better. So I've got this script open, and I'm just going to ask a particular model, tell me how you would optimize this script. Now, I didn't create this solution, and I will prefix however long it takes, which is going to show right here. It's the same type of little countdown that you have in all of the standard agentic harnesses, is the correct term. We think editor, but an IDE is the old editor, but now we've got these things called harnesses, and the harness is basically it wraps up all of whatever the knowledge is of the environment that it needs to specifically know to work with that environment most efficiently. So while a Claude code or a codex may be general and it can access the LLM and it has full access to all of the training data, it knows enough about FileMaker, but it may not know all of the little tiny specifics. So that's what I resolved to put into the plugin, is something that allows me to do that. So when we take a look at the result here, and by the way, down at the bottom of the plugin, it has an area where you can select from all kinds of different models. And I've got a really exciting one that I'll talk about a little bit later that's fun for me. But you can see that in the response here, unlike what I would get in Claude code, I've instructed the agent, hey, this particular editor that we use for code, you can actually use these numbers, these line numbers. So you can see it says, I'd simplify no result path with the error constraint and check as written line 22. When I click on line 22, it will highlight line 22. When I click on this, it will actually go highlight those lines 17 through 19. It should here, if it actually makes the selection. There we go. So what the plugin ended up being was a way to get AI to have a path into FileMaker to be able to see to do things. Now I should mention the plugin is Macintosh only, and there is a reason for that, and that's because the Mac OS reveals or has a surface called the Accessibility API, and that's baked into pretty much every application that, not every, but most applications on the Mac. And so because it's baked into FileMaker, that's where you're able to give the agent, which is the brain, the arms and legs that it needs, or let's just say mostly the arms and the hands, in order to directly interact with FileMaker. On Windows, that doesn't exist. So throughout all of this, if I literally just ask the agent, okay, please implement your suggestion, then what it has is it has direct access into FileMaker to directly modify this. Now I'm going to do one thing right before it's thinking. I'm going to do a select all, and I'm going to copy, which I'm already familiar with in FileMaker with copy and paste. And what I'll draw your attention to, and it supports questions and many of the other things that other editors have. I'll go ahead and click Proceed Unverified here and do this. But up at the top right here in this palette, you can see that there is a clipboard. So one of the things in FileMaker, a lot of the other agentic tools, and there's only 2 plugins that currently exist as far as I'm aware. And I saw a snippet of the one of the sessions that Todd was giving at the full access, and he was mentioning to everybody, you're able to write your own plugins, and he's absolutely correct. You are able to write. You can use AI to code in any language that you don't know, and as long as you can structure and build that application and manage the context and the growth of the application so that it doesn't ultimately end up creating garbage, then you are able to work in pretty much any language that you want. You don't have to know it. The models know it better than you will ever be able to know the language.
Matt, quick question. Ian Jemison is asking, when you say plugin, a FileMaker plugin or Claude plugin or both?
It is a FileMaker plugin. It is, I'll say right here, I'll show you. In FileMaker, we'll go to the preferences, we'll go to plugins, and it's right there. It is a FileMaker plugin that you install into FileMaker that is basically a C++ just built-in web server. That's more or less what it is. And you can see what the AI did. I didn't write the script. It's still doing one of the things that you come across with models, and I'm sure you've experienced this if you've used Claude or Codex or whatever. Sometimes the model will take a little bit longer with its thinking. Sometimes it'll go really fast, and that depends on multiple factors. It's the load that the provider has, the effort that you have set for the thinking for the model itself, multiple different results. But you can see that in the plugin, it's literally doing the script for me. I am no longer doing FileMaker scripts because it goes and it has access to directly modify the script itself. I have the security that I'm not worried about what my original script was, because when I copied it to the clipboard, up at the top here is everything that I have ever copied for the duration of while I'm running FileMaker Pro. So if I don't like the results of what the agent has created for me, and I go through the script and I say, no, that's not exactly what I want, I can always either Command Z and revert this script itself. We can see that it's not saved, or I already have it saved on the clipboard. And within the clipboard that the plugin offers, and I don't know why it's taking so long in order to go through all of this. It's probably just thinking a whole lot. And a lot of this does depend on the model that you pick. So down here, I currently have GPT 5.6 Terra, which, by the way, when it comes to models, you absolutely do not need the latest and greatest in order to do simple single FileMaker scripts. Long-running agentic processes where it is doing a lot of different things and maybe coordinating sub-agents, maybe, and only maybe then, you're going to probably use Fable as the thinking model. But when it comes to just FileMaker scripts, unless you're doing heavy investigation into aspects of your FileMaker system, you really don't need the latest and greatest model. And in fact, even the mid-tier models, if you go look at Artificial Analysis, I think that's a website where they've got all the benchmarks that all the AI providers use. I would be able to switch this model to actually Luna, the smallest of Codex's model, and just put it on high, and it would be, in many cases, cheaper and possibly even better in terms of its results than if I was on, say, low or medium of a mid-tier model. And they will all handle FileMaker scripts really super easily and simple, because we're just talking about basic logic here. It's not dealing with multiple different touch points within a very complex code base. But ultimately, you can end up with what you want. A lot of the times I'll use faster models, which will go a little bit faster, and it really depends on what you're doing with your FileMaker code. But ultimately, this was the destination that I wanted to end up at, where I can converse with an agent and have it directly modify my code. Now, it goes so far beyond this that it's really hard to imagine, like, the limits of what you can do. So in the plugin, I created a feature where one of the things that is the best thing that FileMaker has that allows an agent to understand the whole of your solution is the save as XML. So the save a copy as XML has every single iota of what makes your FileMaker solution a FileMaker solution. And that's where this whole thing started out for me, was if all of that knowledge about the solution exists, but it just ends up being in this one super large file that I'm not going to go read all of that XML, but AI loves it. I'm not going to, figure out all of those individual pieces. Well, I need to actually take advantage of that. And so that's where the project started. And it ended, or it didn't end, but it is ending up here with this plugin. Now, the plugin does have, it's $250, but I have magazine subscribers to the FileMaker magazine. They can get $49 off, so it's a $200 plugin. And I will say there is, to other software, there is a bit of a disadvantage because of AI in this regard, and I will say that the analysis tools, while they are wonderful, I no longer have a need for them. That is because when you process that XML file, and then you give access to an agent in order to be able to see everything about that, all of the XML, and you've parsed it, then you have what I have up at the top here called Solution Intelligence. So when I click this button, Analyze the Solution, what is actually happening is it's sending off, well, first off, it made a call to a script within FileMaker, which is simply just running the Save as XML step. We can take a look at the script, and you have different types of classifications of the files in your solution. We all know about the separation model. You will have files that represent your data. You'll have alternative UI files. You'll have utility files, which can be hooked up to multiple different files, and then you'll just have a reference. So in this one file, I know that this FM Quick Start, the only reason that I have it here is just so that I can open it with an open file. So I'll set that as a reference. In the step catalog, that also is a reference, because this isn't a data separation solution. But when I click Confirm, what happens is that Save as XML was pushed out to the disk. It was then loaded into a database that the plugin uses so that I can now ask any possible question about my FileMaker solution. But it goes beyond that, where it's not just a question. If AI can use any knowledge about anything, using either both its training knowledge, it's the training data, and your FileMaker knowledge, you can ask for visualizations about anything about your solution. So down here at the bottom where it's showing all of these annoying things that you can ask, which, by the way, in the plugin, you can scroll to the bottom and there's an option to turn off the placeholder animation. I know it's annoying. Some people have said they dislike it. There's also another option right here that I should say there's a chat button that you can turn on. If I turn that on down at the bottom here, and all it did is in the script workspace, it put a button right here. So that if I want to hide and show the panel that is the chat panel, it's just right there next to the debugger. So it's just a convenient little way to be able to bring that up if you do want to actually write and work with your own code. But with that save as XML parsed into a database and your ability to now ask for anything, you can do all kinds of cool things like visualization. So if I say, give me a mermaid, which is just another, it's a visualization of things of the call stack of the most complex script. Now this seems like such a weird thing to be able to ask. Like, how would an agent know anything about my FileMaker solution, first find the most complex script, then create a diagram about it? Well, that's exactly what you can do, and hopefully it'll work here, because what I'm doing now is I'm what I'm calling commingling my context, or that's what I think about it. So typically your context window, you want to usually stay very focused within a context window and then start a new session, which in the plugin terms would be clicking a new conversation. Because AI can, once you fill the context window with too many different things, it's like giving a person 10 tasks when they're much better served when you give them one. They go do it, and then they come back and they ask you for the next one, and then you give them another one, and then they go do that. That's exactly how you should be thinking about all of your interactions with AI. Is what is the focus thing I'm doing right now? I go, I do it, that happens within that context window, and then I either destroy it or it just basically gets saved to the side. And the plugin has affordances for that too. Like down here at the bottom, there's a little chat history where you can see everything that you have interacted with, and that works on a file-by-file basis. So if I was in a different file, I would have all of the chats for that specific file. But you can see right here that it went off and it actually it looked at the save as XML and it processed whatever it found from the save as XML, and then it gave me this little show in web viewer. Now I already have it on screen right here. It's just as a popover, but you can make a dedicated window. It really doesn't matter. If we go into layout mode and I show that popover, you can see that it's just a popover right here that has a name of AGFM. I figured that nobody would create a web viewer with the name AGFM, and that's what the plugin relies on. This one dedicated web viewer, if you put it on any layout anywhere or on a dedicated layout in a dedicated window, what it does is it affords you the ability to have an agent create visualizations about your FileMaker system or anything else and put it right into a web viewer. So when I click the show in web viewer, it's actually finding that this solution does not have a whole lot of complex scripts. And it's telling me there's no called scripts, which that may be a bit of an issue in terms of what it found. It may not have found any scripts, because I know there are scripts that have more complex calls to this, so I'd need to actually investigate that. But there's the ability to save this and to copy the source, everything that you're used to with anything else where you can save these things. That's what the plugin provides. So fundamentally, the result that I ended up with from starting with the open source, and we're going to go through that here right after I wrap up this, but the core of the plugin is it will look at the save as XML, it'll parse it, put it into a digestible format that an agent can then go and query about, with all of the links and references that allows it to basically go into FileMaker. Like if I say, can you open the quick find script for invoices? Just being able to tell it that, it should be able to go into that solution intelligence, find the script. It will then use open quickly and open the script for me. So I didn't touch anything. It just went there for me, and it opened it up. And I can, hit a return here, and I'm now in edit mode, and it now sees that script, and I can just start to interact with it and ask for whatever I want to do with it. It also creates in the chat these deep links, which will do the same thing. And you can see right there, it's using Open Quickly in order to navigate FileMaker. In fact, if you haven't started using Open Quickly and you don't want to use Open Quickly, which is super advantageous because you can go to fields, you can go to layouts, you can go to anything, scripts, etc. All I did, it was in the plugin, I taught the plugin, here's what you tell an agent, and that agent gets it as a tool, and then it can just use Open Quickly to go wherever it wants to go within FileMaker. So eventually and ultimately, if they expose things like relationships, etc., which they are already doing through their third-party tool, which I am also integrating into the plugin, but currently it is limited to working with the file and it having to be offline. I wanted to be able to do things online, and hopefully we'll get that solution from Claris.
Matt, there's a question
yeah.
really quick. Lynn's asking, do you have a set of rules and a saved prompt for starting new scripts?
I do not have a set of rules, but I will definitely show you where, and I actually don't advise people to, you can copy and paste ideas, but the rules are usually really pretty specific about the project. You'll have global rules, which you can put in your global agents MD, and then you'll have project-specific agent MD. And the project-specific agents MD is almost always specific to the project. And there's things that you can do. There's rules that you can set up that really depend on how you work. Like here's a good example. I just learned recently watching a video about a rule that you can put into your agents MD, that the rule is just a simple sentence. I mean, we're literally programming with natural language nowadays. That the simple sentence is, if I forget how it went. If I get on to you about a mistake that you made, I want you to write that mistake to a mistakes.md file. And then I want you to, in the Claude MD file, which I'm going to reference, Claude MD and an Agents MD are the exact same thing. Anthropic is the only provider who does their own Agents MD, and they call it Claude MD. So you should know that the whole of the rest of all agentic industry, everybody else except for Anthropic uses Agents MD. So I will refer to Agents MD, and typically you just link one to the other so that they're both exactly the same thing, which we'll see in the open source project. But that mistakes example is, maybe you don't care about mistakes. And so that particular rule or the way that you handle mistakes would be different than somebody else. Maybe you don't like the name of the file mistakes.md. Maybe you want to use, common_errors.md. There's a lot of preference in this. And when somebody says, can I have or use your rules? When you ask for it, don't ask for it to specifically directly implement what somebody else has done, because it's just like clothing. You prefer whatever you choose to wear because of your preferences. So the Agents MD file is what should be a representation of your preferences of how you want to work, how you want to interact with the agent, what you want the agent to do, and how you want it to interact with your project. And so that's what brings me back to the open source and how it actually created this plugin and the functionality that it has baked in. And it is this right here. So when I switch to the browser, so as I stated at the beginning, there is the open source version, and then there is the plugin. And you can write the agents MD, but use an @ reference to point to agents MD if you need. Yes, the @ symbol in the, which we'll take a look at right here quickly. So, out of curiosity for everybody, if you've got the chat open, just using a Y or an N, I would be very curious how many people have directly edited or modified the agents MD file. Just put a Y or an N in the chat, and we'll see everybody who is or isn't or hasn't. So we've got just 3 people so far. In. Okay. In. Okay. Good deal. So it looks like we've got a lot of ins. And here's what I'm going to say. The single most important file that exists in all of agentic interaction is that file. It is this file right here, agents.md, which on my computer, if I could, I can't zoom the Finder, I don't believe. I can make the icon larger. There we go, which I'll do that. And that closed my window. I wanted to close this palette, but the toolbar, how do I move this toolbar? There we go. Let me get that Finder window back really quick. Create a new Finder window. Where are you? Oh, you're creating it off screen. And go to Agentic FM right there. There we go. So that little arrow on there that's showing that it's pointing to agents MD is actually pointing to I believe it's not in Cursor. Is it in Claude? There we go. It is pointing to, in this case, Claude MD, and that's because I originally started this project with Claude, and so I just left it as Claude MD, and I pointed agents MD is pointing to Claude MD. So if I double click this agents, it's literally just opening up this file. And whether you do one or the other, if you have both of them so that an agent can see what is going on, this is the single file that it controls the world of your agentic experience in terms of how it interacts. So if I open up this file, the Claude MD right here, from the open source project, let me bring that on screen so that you can see this. So when you go to Agentic FM and the website, and you see this, this is the pretty website, and then the pretty website has this link of star on GitHub, and then it goes over to GitHub. And if you've not become familiar with it's not open source, but it's basically version control. You will probably become familiar with version control because agents, that's all they want to do is work with version control. They only want to work with the file system and files because that's the rest of how the coding world works. Whereas in FileMaker, our coding world is baked up into the script workspace that we have right here. So all you have to really do is teach an agent how to get access to all of this as if it was files, or in the case of the plugin that I created, I'm simply just pointing inside of FileMaker and letting it directly read this as if it was a file. So that's all that I did when the open source project started, is I created an open source project that went over to FileMaker, and then it runs a script. There is a script in here that you copy. It is this Agentic FM folder. Let me collapse everything. This Agentic FM folder literally has one script that attempts to get a path to the folder on a hard drive. So if we switch over to the Finder, What is the folder? The folder is the project that I released that's open source right here, Agentic FM. That folder has the single most important file that teaches the agent everything about how you're going to interact with FileMaker. So when you look at that file of claude.md, it then has all of the instructions. Now in this case, some of the instructions don't apply to me as a FileMaker developer. For example, Python. Python is on the operating system, but there is something that needs to talk to FileMaker. An agent has to have a path or a bridge into FileMaker, and there's multiple ways that it can do it. It can do it directly via OData, or it can do it through the clipboard, but there's nothing native on the clipboard, but there is native tools on the operating system. So using Python, what ended up happening is I had to create a bridge that would bridge into FileMaker, and that was a thing called a companion server. Now this is where doing things in open source and doing things with all these different servers starts to get really complex for some people, especially developers who don't want to go into the command line. Because when I switch over to my terminal, you can see that what's been running in the background is everything that we see here is a server. It's a server that I started so that when I'm talking with an agent, that agent can hit this server, which gives it the road or the bridge into FileMaker in terms of working with the clipboard. And so that's what the open source project did. You had to start that server, or you had to tell an agent to start the server for you, and then once the server was started, then it could interact with the FileMaker clipboard, and it can see things on the clipboard that you could do. But you had to manually go in, and you had to select all of this. You had to explicitly copy it to get it onto the clipboard. Then you had to switch over to your agent, which would be your application like Codex or Claude. Then you had to type in your prompt of, I want to do this, dun, 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 dun. It would be able to pull it off of the clipboard as XML, which is really big and heavy, do the modifications, and then put something back on the clipboard for you to actually interact with, or for the changes to actually be there. And that's what the open source project is all about and what it does. And on GitHub, when you see a GitHub repository, which it would behoove you to become familiar with GitHub and open source. It's the way that people are going to be releasing software galore. I mean, just tons and tons of software. In fact, already there are so many people that are using agents to create software specific to FileMaker. So many things are being replicated. There's so many database design report rippers, SaxML rippers. This is the save as XML. All kinds of tools, log analysis tools, all kinds of stuff. And I'll show you on GitHub, one of the best things to know about is that we'll create just a general tab here and go to GitHub, so that I can show you how I actually figure out or see what the latest is going on with FileMaker in the world of open source, what people are putting out. Click the little plus or the little magnifying glass and just type in FileMaker. When you type in FileMaker, it will list all of the different FileMaker related GitHub projects. But there's a selection that you can see right here, sort by. It comes up and it defaults to best match. Go to recently updated. And when you go to recently updated, you will see the projects that people are working on that they're using agents to upload to GitHub, which is public, which most of the time you're going to be doing stuff private. But you'll see what people were. There's something by Chris Ippolite right there that he's creating some open source. He just updated that 37 minutes ago. You've got GitHub and GitHub for FileMaker. There's Agentic FM. I just pushed a new push today. Marcel's got FM Lab, which he also is processing the save as XML into DuckDB. Now, I will say that Marcel and I are doing the exact same thing. There's nothing that Marcel is doing that's any different than what I'm doing in terms of processing the save as XML. The only difference is he's doing it outside of FileMaker and I'm doing it inside of FileMaker. So when you're looking at the plugin that I have here, I got to get this little bar down at the bottom here. I know you don't see it, but it's bugging me. So when I open up the plugin, in the plugin, if I go to FileMaker's settings and I go to plugins and I go to select the Agentic FM and I click on configure and it brings up a folder, I am simply, and we look at the data tab right here, I have chat history database, I have a clipboard database, I have a where is it, providers, solutions folder, and then I have a solution ID. This ID is the internal UUID that is assigned to this file within the save as XML file, and this is a database of, it's the same thing as Marcel's DuckDB, except it's accessible through the plugin. And I will tell you this, it's just a SQLite database. And in terms of performance, whether it's DuckDB or SQLite, they're just super fast databases. You know, I would put it in FileMaker, but I'll be honest, FileMaker is not going to be as fast, and its own SQL implementation is not nearly as powerful as SQLite. So when it comes to an agent and being able to give sub-millisecond response times, having a plugin in FileMaker that's based on C++, which itself is super fast, it being able to tell an agent, hey, go search a SQLite database, look for anything about this particular FileMaker solution, and then report back either visually or textually in this chat, is just, it's exactly what I think it should be in FileMaker. But an agent should be able to do more. It should be able to directly modify relationships, layouts, any and every aspect of FileMaker in order to understand that system. And hopefully we'll eventually get there. But that's what's happening in the FileMaker space. And when we look at that one single file, if there's one thing that you can walk away from this talk, is learn how to modify the ClaudeMD file to give specific instructions at every single point that an agent either is or isn't doing what you want it to do. Most of the time we're stopping at, well, it didn't do what I want it to do, I'm going to now tell it to do this other thing. But also when it does do things that you like and you want to have that repeated, this is exactly where you need to go, is into this file to basically give it instructions. And so you can see that this claude.md file, or agentsmd, is simply giving instructions to this open source project called Agentic FM of how it is going to interact with FileMaker. It tells it that if you're running in a virtual environment, it's got some skills such as an icon swap. It's got instructions about how it needs to use Python in order to actually do that icon swap. You scroll down here a little bit lower, it tells you what it needs to do when you actually start up. It tells you how do you actually detect the environment, all of it written in Markdown, of course. Let's see, I should be able to get that bigger for you guys. These are all of the quote-unquote rules. So when you're asking about, oh, can you give me your rules? And I tell you, no, the rules are specific to whatever your project is about, or however you're interacting with your solution. So in Agentic FM, determining the environment detection really only applies to how Agentic FM has been structured to work with FileMaker in terms of taking the save as XML export, exploding it into all of the little files, which if I need to show that, I should. So in Agentic FM, which is basically just a folder with a collection of subfolders, one of those folders is a folder called Agent. This instruction file that we've been looking at right here, the only thing it does is it simply says, go run a script that has the save as XML step. You're going to save that file into a folder called XML parsed. It saves it into a full XML exports folder right here. So we can see that here's my invoice solution. It saved an XML file. We can expand it right here. It puts a date on it. Those are all old ones. Let's get to this one right here, my most recent. That is the file that came out from FileMaker. And then the open source project, it actually calls that tool that I referenced very early on called FMXML Export Exploder. It was created by another developer. It's open source. The project downloads it. It then explodes all of the different scripts. So when we look at the scripts sanitized, you can see right here, it broke down, it took that one save as XML and split it, and it just blew it up into all of the little parts, the accounts, the base directory, custom functions, custom menus, the extended privileges, the file access, the layouts, everything. This all becomes all of the little individual parts that an agent actually needs. So there's my invoice solution right there. And when I expand it, you can see it even creates the exact same folder structure that I have in the script workspace. So if we open the script workspace and we look at what are the folders in the script workspace, well, I've got Agentic FM, I've got utilities, clients, setup, etc. Oh, there's Agentic FM, there's clients, there's setup, there's invoices, there's utility, and it has that little ID. The ID that we've become familiar with, that underneath the hood is what everything hinges off in FileMaker. And when I look at the Quick Find folder and look at the Quick Find clients, which is script ID 104, thanks to the MBS plugin, and I go over to Quick Find, there is the Quick Find script right there. So this one file now, being a text file, is what you can hand to an agent. But if we open that file up in Vim, what we are handing to the agent, or passing across the wire, well, in this case, that's the human readable version, which is the lightweight version, which is what we want to give an agent. But what the agent actually ends up using many times is in not the scripts sanitized, but in the regular scripts where we have the exact same folders. But when we look at the Quick Find here and we look at that same file, this is the XML version, and we'll see that it's very verbose and complex, and what we don't want to necessarily give to the agent because it has to chew on all of that data. So that's essentially the evolution of this project. If you want to understand, like, how can I use an agent to work with my FileMaker solution, you don't even have to use Agentic FM if you don't want to. It may help you if you do want to use it. Essentially, all you're going to do is, in fact, the instructions on the website itself literally say that the install, if you want to take the easy way out and not have to figure things out, such as being able to do a git clone yourself on the command line, which is that command right there, a git clone, you can literally copy that. And if I went over to, if you're using a, and let me hide, there's so much going on the screen, I'm just going to hide some of this stuff for right now, so that it's easy for us to focus. So if you are used to working with the harness that is Codex, or let's say the harness that is Claude, and that's what you have downloaded, if you just paste in, if you create a new chat or a new folder, and I will say, because of how code works in the rest of the coding world, you have to use a folder. You just have to use a folder. Here I have a folder called invoice solution, but I can point to the folder that is the Agentic FM, and that's when it can see into my FileMaker solution. But if I don't have Agentic FM downloaded, I can create a folder on my computer, point to that folder, and then literally just say, exactly what's on that web page, which is help me set up Agentic FM. So if I copy, and as long as AI has, Sol even said it, as long as there's a path, then what will happen is the agent can find it. So if I say help me set up Agentic FM and I give it the actual information it needs of a Git clone, this right here is the only thing that the agent actually needs. It would go download that folder. It will actually turn on this particular server, which needs to be running for the clipboard to actually be interacted with by the agent. And then it will run for you. And that particular server will also shut down automatically after a certain period of time if you're not using it, so it won't be running. And that's how you become informed about how it works. And my suggestion would be, if you do download Agentic FM, and when I said you don't even have to use it, you can literally just put in a prompt, and I don't want this. What are you doing here? Let's see, that's bash command. None, I don't want that. There we go, get rid of that. You can literally, and will this expand? Yes, it does. By the way, if you don't know, every one of these clients that you're working with, they are nothing more than web browsers baked into an environment. They're most often Electron applications, which is the V8 engine built into the Electron, which compiles the V8 in. And you can use the plus and minus keys in order to make things larger and bigger, because they are nothing but a web service built into the Electron shell. So if I simply said, explain to me how Agentic FM is working with FileMaker, it will literally look at the open source folder and it'll say, well, it's using this companion server, which is in Python, in order to be able to copy and paste FM XML snippet across the clipboard. And that's exactly what it's doing. There is nothing that you don't or won't know about as long as you have this agent running, because it will explain everything, it will do most everything, and then it will coordinate most everything, and it's really the jump between the last two. Your ability to know that it will do everything, and then making the jump to how do I get it to coordinate everything for me, is the gap. That's what you're trying to jump into, where all of a sudden you can have agents not just writing your FileMaker scripts and creating them, but basically creating anything else that you want to do. And I'll tell you what the surprise is in the whole of this session here. I am not a C++ programmer. I don't know C++. It's very complex. It has multiple different flavors that go back to, they have variations of C++ that are like 2003, 2005, 2000, whatever. It's the same thing as FileMaker. Each time that FileMaker gets new functionality and that gets added on, sometimes those new methods of doing things deprecate older methods. But if you know nothing about the language and you're going into FileMaker and you don't know that you shouldn't use lookups because lookups were basically replaced by auto enters, unless you need the very unique aspect of a lookup that will do the next highest value, then you just don't know. And C++ to me is that same thing. But the agents now are so powerful that I don't even have to know C++. In fact, I watched, I think, a little bit of the video that Bob basically vibe coded with an agent in order to create a Swift application. And even if Bob was the most capable at Swift, the model will still be able to beat him in speed, accuracy, and other things. The difficulty that you come into is that the one limiting factor in all of agentic coding is the context window. The agent is dumb. It doesn't know anything until you feed it what you need it to know at the point in time that you, dependent on whatever you're dealing with. And it has to know how to go to all of the different, what they call touch points within the code in order to make sure that it doesn't mess up. And that's what people are complaining about. When they say there's AI slop, it's not because the agent doesn't know, it's because you haven't informed it how to actually get there. Because in all of agentic coding, what this one file is, when we look at it, this one agent's MD file, or the Claude MD, it's the manual that is given to the new employee when they walk into a McDonald's franchise. If you take a new employee and you stick them into the middle of the store and you say, okay, make the fries, they will have no clue how to do what you want them to do. You have something that's documented that says, first step, go over to the oven. Second step, turn on the dial. Third step, make sure the dial is 300 or whatever degrees. Fourth step, step. You start off with that, and that's how you make the jump, because eventually you get to the point where you're telling the agent, we need to improve this process. I noticed that what happens was this, and this went wrong, as opposed to this, and this. Oh, then you're having a conversation, and then you take those learnings, which are the memory, which is what Claude and Codex, they're all capturing that memory and storing it sort of away from you to keep you dependent on their harnesses. But you need to know that you need to capture those memories into your documentation that says, no, don't save it as your own memory, save it into this doc and link it to my Claude MD, that when I ask or talk about this specific script or this specific layout or this specific relationship or this specific feature of my database, that's when you need to reference this information, because it is the manual that tells you, go to the oven, turn it on, set it to this, do this, and that is what makes agentic coding possible. That is why I've been able to actually create this plugin, is because I've been able to coordinate a very complex process with all the different things that get in the way of you having an agent create something garbage versus something good. And that's why you're able to iterate super fast on the software. And so that's how the open source project started. That's where it evolved from, this collection of folders that you can download. You can use it. It's free. You can ask the agent anything you want about it, about how it works, about how to set it up, about what's not working, about how to get it working. And it will wire that up and figure out how to get into FileMaker. If you don't want to deal with the XML and you want a more direct and easier path, then what I've created, the extension beyond that has taken me multiple months. It's actually taking me since February in order to do this plugin. It's not magic. You don't snap your fingers and an agent just builds you something. You are the architect. You still must direct the agent, and you still must be aware of all of the different things of what can go wrong. Because when you tell an agent, hey, we're going to put in this new feature, the agent is very, it wants to complete the feature. Once you give it a goal, it will just go and go and go. But if the agent doesn't know and you haven't informed it, hey, you know what? It actually impacts this other part of the system. The same way that when I create a layout, and that layout is going to create a PDF based off of a relationship that needs to go to some other table, but it also has a reference to another table for additional data, the agent will just go off and it'll just create the script about the PDF, and it'll ignore the fact that there's another relationship that it needs to pay attention to get that data, unless I have in my instruction, either in the prompt or within the the documentation, literally said, you also need to account for this additional data that is integrated into the PDF through this particular relationship. Specificity is what rules the world in terms of agentic coding, and it's the evolution of building up all of those specifics within the system that you're using that gets you at the end goal that you're actually trying to achieve.
Hey, Matt.
So that's what I've got. I can take a few questions. I do have to go pick up my daughter, and we'll have to leave in no fewer than 10 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Oh, that's awesome, Matt. Thank you for sharing this. This is amazing that you got into C++ and wired up, you know, a FileMaker plugin, and that you're encouraging us that we can actually make our own plugin. So if you were going to do a plugin, um, is there like documentation, or just ask the agent, or?
Um, I, this is a really good little clue. There, remember when I said over here on Git repository, and remember when I said go in and search GitHub and look for recently updated?
Mhm.
There are other people who are also creating FileMaker plugins. And so while my plugin isn't open source, there are plugins that are open source. So if you think about it a little bit, what is a plugin that we all use that's been open source for a long time?
Base elements.
So my suggestion would be go search for base elements and then talk to your agent and say, using this, copy the GitHub URL and feed it the URL and say, using this plugin as a reference, I would like to start to create my own plugin. You're able to do that. And if you scroll through this list of all of these open source projects, you'll find other people that are creating plugins. Things like, I think Rabbit, the MTQQ messaging system, somebody has baked that into a plugin. Another person has written a plugin that really hyper extends the SQL interaction that you can do within FileMaker, because FileMaker's own execute SQL is select only, and he didn't maybe didn't want to use the SQL that was within base elements, but he created his own that actually has like JSON output from the result of SQL. It's a really cool plugin. I forget what it's called. You'd have to search within this list, or just basically search for it, and you can reference his plugin. If you wanted to bake in SQL, the world of open source is what is making all of this software explosion possible. There's literally nothing that you can't find on GitHub, or there's other ones, other repositories, where you simply just point an agent to that and then say, this is my reference, because agents literally love examples. You can give them bad examples of bad code, but you can also give them good examples of good code. And then it's up to you to coordinate, orchestrate, and direct your project to make sure it stays good code and on track. And the hint that I will give you there is, rather than just having an agent do it, ask an agent to tell you, I need to become familiar with version control. If you do not learn or become familiar with version control, and you just start going off to your agent saying, we're going to create an Xcode app or a FileMaker app, there will be points in time that you will interact with the agent and say, we need to fix this. And until you understand version control and your project starts to get complex enough, there will be things that can go wrong within version control, where it's important to understand branches, work trees. The rest of the coding world, you don't really have to know how to use PRs, pull requests as they're called. If you're a solo developer working on a plugin, because you're not going to be using, that's more for team development. But version control is where agents live. It's where all other code has lived, and we just now need to become familiar with them as FileMaker developers if you're going to be doing agentic coding on anything outside of FileMaker.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just stay in FileMaker.
It's one of the reasons why I wanted to show the IDE, because that's how I learned version control. The VS Code, Cursor, whatever. It's really good at just having buttons like a GUI for your version control, so you can learn it that way. And once you've kind of understand the basics, then you can ask Claude or Codex or whatever just to do it for you. But do you work now just basically in Codex or Claude, just using the terminal, or like
I
not
can
not the
actually
terminal specifically, but like as opposed to like an IDE.
I can show you how I actually work. Here is this particular editor, CMAX. You can see over here on the side that it's got different tabs. There's multiple ways that you can have multiple windows, but one of the ways that I'm most familiar is what's called a multiplexer. And so I usually code in a multiplexed environment where it's just one single window that you can create as many different panes as you need, and you can move across them. So I have a Claude session here, a Claude session. Well, there's this Claude session, this Claude session. This is the performance of the machine that is building the plugin for me. This is output of the tail of the log. And what you can do is in a multiplexer, if you need a new window to literally start working with a new agent, you just create it. So I just go like this, and I now have a new agent, and I can simply type in Claude danger, and that basically I'm in the local. I'd have to go into my sandbox in order to do that. But in essence, for me to spin up a new agent, it's just a couple of key commands, and then I'm working with a new agent, and then I'm down here just attempting to make sure I don't exhaust my resources, because it is possible to like run 5 agents at a time and have them all doing something, and then you again are the coordinator. You have to make sure that they don't step on each other and mess each other up, and that's all of the orchestration part of agentic coding. But using a multiplexer allows you to do this either directly on your own machine, or what I prefer, on a remote machine. So I'll use a dedicated machine which is actually building the plugin for me, and that's where that's always running my multiplexer, and I can be not on my machine. I just go in, and then this whole environment that's on screen, it doesn't matter where I go. I just log in, and it brings this back up for me to edit.
Very cool.
So it's actually really nice. And if you're interested in learning a multiplexer, tell your agent I want to learn about using a multiplexer, and it's most often going to be Tmux is the most popular, but the new and up and coming one is called Herder, which is HERDR, not with the ER. But that's how I code, is multiple agents, because I really can't be stuck with just one window. When you're using the GUI, you're stuck with one agent doing something unless you run multiple sessions on the side, which you can.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, multiple sessions on the side. But so you're no longer in an IDE anymore. That's really what I was wondering.
I use both, but I'm terminal based, and I use multiplexer for most everything. So I'd say probably 90%. The other 10% I will go in and use I'll use Cursor when I want to use their IDE, just because they have their version control. It shows you when files have been modified. There's a whole sequence of being able, when you work with an agent, being able to watch what it's doing while it's doing it, so that you can correct it within process when it starts to go off the rails in a direction you don't want. But you want to be able to see which files it's actually editing, so that you can look at the diffs of those if you are observing the code as it's being written.
Yeah, so that's very cool.
Oh, but I do unfortunately have to go. So,
well, it's been awesome. Thank you, Matt. It's been a long time since you've been around to FMDiSC, so I really appreciate you joining us today. And for everybody else, I hope that today was really encouraging, to get working with AI and FileMaker.
Yep, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. You can send to support@agentic-fm or the magazine or ISO Productions, wherever you can find my email address and get in touch with me.
Good stuff. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks again, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, everyone.
Eric, I see you had a note here. Yes, I was talking about guitar players. And Full Access had a few on site. Oh, that's awesome. This is one of the great things about the FileMaker community. There's so many musicians. I wonder if Matt plays something.
I don't know. Well, yeah, Michael's still here. He plays a whole bunch of instruments.
Hi.
And Randy, of course.
Where's Randy? Is he on here?
Yep, Randy.
Oh, yeah.
And the Reverend Dave himself, Dave Borg. Well, I think that's it, everybody. If there's any more questions that I can answer, if you guys want to chat for a few more minutes, we can, but otherwise we can wrap this up.
Thank you, Matt. It was a lovely meeting.
Thank you.
All right, bye, everybody.
Matt,
Thanks, all.
All right. Thank you guys for
Sol.
joining us today. Hope it was helpful. Have a good one.
Tony does the same thing he does in